It was supposed to be just another routine flight. The morning was clear, the Atlantic stretched endlessly below, and the skies above Virginia Beach echoed with the thunder of Navy jets cutting across the horizon. But on October 14, 1997, one of those jets vanished from radar in a matter of seconds. The official story was simple: mechanical failure, a pilot lost at sea. Tragic, but not unheard of. Yet the truth was far from simple. Investigators would soon uncover a tangled web of betrayal, obsession, and calculated murder. And at the center of it all, a Navy pilot who turned his training into a weapon against one of his own. Stay with me until the end, because this story proves that sometimes the deadliest enemies don't come from the skies above, but from the wingman flying right beside you. Our story takes place at Naval Air Station Oceana, Virginia Beach, a sprawling base often called the East Coast home of naval aviation. In the 1990s, Oceana was buzzing with activity. Dozens of F/A-18 Hornets and Tomcats lined the tarmac, ready for takeoff. Pilots lived under constant pressure, trained to near perfection, and carried the weight of representing the very best of American military power. It was a world of speed and steel, of early mornings filled with the smell of jet fuel, the deafening roar of engines, and the adrenaline rush of flight. But behind the glamour, life was isolating. Families often lived in the shadow of the Navy. Wives and husbands were left at home, while their partners spent long months deployed or buried in training. This was the environment that bred not just loyalty and camaraderie, but also resentment, jealousy, and dangerous secrets. Lieutenant Commander Mark Hastings, 34 of age, a decorated veteran, respected instructor, and natural leader. He had flown combat missions during operations in the Persian Gulf and earned a reputation for calm under pressure. Colleagues admired him, students respected him, but those close to him saw the cracks. Long deployments had strained his marriage, and mounting debts gnawed at his once stable life. And there was young Lieutenant James Walker, age 28. He's ambitious, and intensely competitive. Walker had idolized Hastings early in his career, seeing him as a mentor. But admiration soon turned to rivalry. Walker wasn't content to rise slowly through the ranks. He wanted Hastings' reputation, his position, and ultimately, his life outside the Navy. On October 14, 1997, Hastings and Walker took off for a standard two-plane training exercise over the Atlantic. The mission was routine: formation flying, simulated combat maneuvers, and coordinated returns. Nothing unusual. At 9:47 a.m., Walker radioed the base. His tone was calm, almost detached. He reported that Hastings' jet had suffered a catastrophic engine failure. He said he'd seen Hastings attempt to eject, but the aircraft spiraled downward before disappearing into the ocean. Rescue crews scrambled, combing the waters for hours. Wreckage was recovered, torn metal, floating debris, but no body. Hastings was presumed dead. To the Navy, it was a tragic but not unheard of accident. Pilots knew the risks. Training accidents had claimed lives before. But almost immediately, small details began to gnaw at investigators. Why hadn't Hastings radioed in distress? Why was Walker the sole witness? And why did the jet's flight data recorder, its black box, suggest maneuvers inconsistent with engine failure? The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, took over. What they uncovered shocked even hardened investigators. First, the oxygen system in Hastings' jet showed signs of tampering. Chemical traces were discovered, a substance capable of rendering a pilot unconscious within minutes. Hastings, they believed, had been incapacitated mid-flight. Second, maintenance logs revealed that Walker had unusual access to Hastings' aircraft the night before the flight. He wasn't assigned to pre-flight checks, yet his signature appeared in the logbook. Then came the bombshell. Phone records showed frequent late-night calls between Walker and Sarah Hastings. Witnesses reported seeing the two together in off-base diners, holding whispered conversations. The picture was becoming clear. But without a body, the case was circumstantial. The Navy hesitated to accuse one of its own of cold-blooded murder. For months, the investigation stalled. Then, in April 1998, a fisherman hauling nets off the Virginia coast made a grisly discovery. Caught in his nets was a fragment of an ejection seat. Forensic testing confirmed it came from Hastings' aircraft. But the real breakthrough was what clung to it: fibers from Hastings' flight suit and residues of the same chemical found in his oxygen line. The evidence was undeniable. Hastings hadn't suffered an accident. He'd been poisoned, disabled, and left helpless as his plane was deliberately flown into the sea. Walker had staged the perfect crime, or so he thought. In May 1998, NCIS agents arrested Lieutenant James Walker. He denied everything, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. The trial that followed captured national headlines. The Washington Post ran, "Navy pilot murdered in love triangle, court hears." The prosecution presented Walker as a man consumed by jealousy and ambition. They argued he saw Hastings not just as a rival in the skies, but as an obstacle in love. Sarah Hastings, called to the stand, admitted to the affair but swore she had no knowledge of Walker's plot. Her voice shook as she described feeling manipulated and trapped between the two men. One of the most dramatic moments came when Commander Ellen Price testified. Looking directly at Walker, she said, "In this profession, trust is everything. And you destroyed it the moment you tampered with his jet." The defense tried to argue that Hastings' crash was a tragic accident, pointing to the dangers of military aviation. But the forensic evidence, the chemical traces, the tampered oxygen line, the altered logs, was overwhelming. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned its verdict: guilty of premeditated murder. Walker was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The impact rippled far beyond the courtroom. Sarah Hastings left Virginia, moving with her children to escape the media storm. In interviews, she expressed guilt, saying, "If I'd ended things sooner, maybe Mark would still be alive." Mark Hastings' children grew up without their father. His colleagues at Oceana still recall his empty locker, a quiet reminder of how quickly trust can be shattered. Within the Navy, the case forced a reckoning. Pilots are trained to depend on one another with absolute faith. Wingmen literally entrust their lives to each other in the sky. This case exposed what happens when that trust is violated. Commander Price later reflected, "We fly within inches of each other at supersonic speed. If you can't trust the man on your wing, you're already dead." The murder of Lieutenant Commander Mark Hastings is more than just a tale of jealousy and betrayal. It is a stark reminder of how human weakness can infiltrate even the most disciplined of institutions. Beneath the steel of the jets and the rigid codes of honor, there were still flaws: envy, desire, and ambition, powerful enough to kill. And perhaps the most haunting question remains: how many other crimes inside powerful institutions are written off as accidents, quietly buried beneath the weight of duty and secrecy? What do you think? Was Walker's crime a calculated act of passion, or was there more to the story than we may ever know? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into shocking true crime cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. This story is a fictionalized true crime narrative, created for entertainment and awareness purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental.